Frontline. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Trauma-Informed Services and Policies to Support Immigrant and Mixed Status Families in Early Care and Education, a trauma-informed approach to working with providers and families. Due to the large number of registered participants, the audio will be in broadcast mode only, but we do want this to be as interactive as possible, and so we ask that if you have any questions or experiences to share, please do so in the chat box, and we will open the chat in a few minutes so everyone can see that discussion. This is an extremely rich topic, and not every slide in the presentation will be shared during the webinar, but the slides are there as resources and will be available, the slides and recording, after the webinar on the landing pad for this series. Recent changes in immigration policy are creating new and intense challenges, including increased trauma for infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and their families, and the teachers and programs that work with them. With funding from the Irving Harris Foundation, the BUILD Initiative, in partnership with the Center for Law and Social Policy, has organized this series of webinars and blogs intended to help providers, state policy leaders, and advocates work most effectively in this climate. While this series is focused on the unique trauma experienced by immigrant and mixed status families and young children, tonight we'll be discussing strategies to support the providers caring for these children and families. We're honored to have with us again Carmen Rosa Noroña, Child Trauma Clinical Services and Training Lead at Child Wellness to Violence Project and Associate Director of the Boston Site Early Trauma Treatment Network at Boston Medical Center. As we are also joined by Dr. Vilma Reyes, Assistant Clinical Professor at University of California, San Francisco, Department of Psychiatry in the Child Trauma Research Program. And I'll be moderating this afternoon, Danielle Fuentes-Johnson with the BUILD Initiative. We take a quick review of our agenda this evening. We'll review the stance of the framework, review the social, historical, and political aspects of immigration policy, and the implication for young children and their families, review the developmental trauma and diversity-informed strategies for early childhood education settings, the impact of the work on the provider, organizational and individual strategies in preventing and addressing the effects of the work on, and then we'll open it up for questions. With that, I would like to turn the program over to Carmen Rosa Noroña.
Good afternoon. So as
I think we can go ahead and continue, and we can still see some of the responses. We'll catalog them
Okay.
as they come in.
So as we
that have funding from international countries, and then in a way how the families who are coming here come here to seek safety, because all this violence that was generated by this intervention from international, very powerful international countries created some of these unrest. And so these massacres or these wars that happened many, many years ago really fragmented society. And in the case of Latin America, with colonialism and oppression that usually was targeted to the very to indigenous communities, that continued, and that is, like how we think about historical trauma and how these communities have continued to be oppressed, and many of the families from these communities are the ones that we see now at the border, and that unfortunately are suffering all what we know. So then what is happening today seems to be an echo of these historical trauma, and we have to be aware of the role that our country has in those initial wars or types of violence that affected these countries, and why these families are here.
Okay, Carmen Rosa, thank you so much for that review of the historical, those reminders of the historical causes for where we are now. And as we mentioned, it's a very, very rich topic, and these slides will be available for the audience to review. Both the webinar 2, the recording, and the PowerPoint is on the landing pad, and this will be as well. And we've discussed the impacts of historical trauma and threats of separation and traumatic separation in early childhood settings reviewed tonight and in webinar 2, especially as they affect the children and their families. But how do we support the providers serving these families that may be experiencing secondary trauma and stress? So I'd like to invite Dr. Vilma Reyes to share with us now some organizational and individual strategies to prevent and address the effects of secondary trauma on providers. Dr. Reyes, we're eagerly listening.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I used to be a preschool teacher at Head Start, and teaching is very close to my heart. I really value and respect your work as early childhood educators. And I think similarly to my role now as a clinician and to any provider, this is really a labor of love. And if injustices
Dr. Reyes,
happening to them.
We're having a little bit of trouble with the audio. Would you be able to hold the phone maybe a little closer?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Do you want me to repeat everything I said for the past 15 minutes?
No, it just was at the end. It was starting to fade in
Just
and out
at
a
the end,
little
I'm
bit.
sorry.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why are we talking about this and why is this important? Okay. The reality of secondary traumatic stress and vicarious trauma is that belonging and togetherness. And knowing that we are not alone. We're not in this work alone.
We're losing your audio a little bit again.
Oh no! Does it help if I just speak louder, or is it cutting off altogether? That works. So in terms of what we can do as a community and as systems to both identify, prevent, and address secondary traumatic stress and vicarious trauma, I think one of the main things you can do is reflective supervision. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by couple more minutes for questions, and I'll wrap up with that.
Well, Dr. Vilma Reyes, thank you so much. This has been such a rich conversation and so many things to talk about. It's stirred up so much in the chat box. I also want to thank Carmen Rosa Noroña, and I want to turn it over to the audience. We've had a number of questions in the chat box. I'll go ahead and start. I'll invite the speakers to take a look at the questions in the chat box as well. But talking about what about the providers themselves being in this situation or having family members at risk? This is a question that's asked a couple of times. I'll turn it over to the speakers.
I've spoken for a while, Carmen Rosa, so let me know if you'd rather take that on. Or
I had a hard time listening to the question. Danielle, can you repeat that?
Sure. What about the providers themselves being in this exact situation or having family members at risk or living in a mixed status family?
Yeah, I think that is a very important issue, and I think that in a lot of the consultations that I do, that is the case. I am an immigrant myself, and I have a lot of privilege, but then I have also suffered in some aspects the impact of immigration policy, with family members, and then I work in a hospital where there are many immigrant providers, so these news affect us. And so there is when, these possibility of embracing what is happening to us, and then many times you might be listening to a story of a parent who is scared, but you are scared for a family member. So then what are, I think that what are some of the I usually try to think what are some of the things or the lessons that I have learned that have helped me or that I have kept me resilient or where I have found strength, and then without necessarily disclosing my situation, but then wondering if there are any sources of strength for the person who is sharing the story with you. And then sometimes you might not have an answer because you might be feeling very lost and you are at a point where you are in the same situation. And sometimes just being in silence and, as Vilma was saying, trying to be present can make a big difference or empathizing or normalizing, the situation to the person. So, for instance, these are very hard moments, or we don't have answers for these, and then, however, what can we do to protect the children? So protect the children from the news. What are some of the things that I can support you with in terms of, doing that? Although you might be feeling very distraught because of your situation. So I think that it's not unusual that this is something that a provider can be experiencing, and that there is very sometimes the boundaries can get blurred. And then one of the things that I also always think is, if I share my story, how is this going to help this person or the family that I am working with? Or what is that I have learned from my story that is going to help or support this person? And sometimes I have learned lessons from the strengths or the strategies that the families that I work with have shared. I don't know, Vilma, you want to add anything else or about this intersectionality piece?
Yeah, I think you said it, Carmen Rosa. I mean, I am an immigrant as well, and this is really close to home, which is why I've made this as my commitment for as my life profession, is to work with this community, and it's so close to my heart, and that can be both a strength and also can make this very difficult. What has helped me is to keep each experience for what it is, because I might be at risk of over-identifying or projecting my experience onto others if I think we're the same by being immigrants. And so one way that I guess I buffer that risk is to try to remain engaged and curious and wondering about their experience on their own, even though there's so many areas of connection and ways we might overlap, but also areas in which our experiences are likely very, very different. So I try to remind myself that this is not my experience, and if it's useful for me to empathize with what's coming up for them, I think we all naturally tap into all the essence of who we are and all the experiences we've had. But I think it can also become a risk factor, or if we over-identify or assume that others might have experienced it the same way. So I think it can bring both risks and potential.
We have two questions that I think are somewhat related, and we may want to unpack together. One is, how can we help our supervisors understand how this immigration issues are affecting us, and then how do we use reflective supervision in an environment that may be hesitant to implement?
I think that the first question is a great question, and it taps into some of what Vilma was reflecting on about organizations, and because linked to that there might be issues like my supervisor maybe doesn't understand me because I am doing the work or I am serving Spanish-speaking families and my supervisor speaks English, and then maybe my supervisor is feeling that she doesn't understand me very well, because like we are doing the work. I am doing the work in a different language. There might be issues where I as a worker I am having multiple roles, and then in addition to what I am expected to do, or because I feel that I really need to help families, because if I don't help them, who else is going to help them? So I think that, again, this is also, like, I think that this presentation is also a call for supervisors and organizations to think about the parallel process, right? That it is important to think about the impact that immigration policy is having in all of us, and particularly to the workforce who might be more connected to the immigrant community because they might be immigrant themselves, and then they might not have a lot of power to change the organization. So then what are the organizational changes that can be implemented? If there are no opportunities to create supervision or pay for a reflective supervisor, then maybe peer supervision is an opportunity. And then to understand more about or do some homework to understand more about the community that you are serving, about your own process, and as we have been saying, your own values. Where do you stand in terms of your work professionally, and then how can you advocate for changes so people don't feel all these different burdens, because sometimes there is a risk with identifying, like Vilma was saying, but sometimes we are not aware of that. And if you are working constantly, or you don't have a space to reflect, you're not even aware that you are over-identifying and that is affecting you. So how can, if you have some kind of leverage in your organization, how can you advocate for those changes so you can from an organizational perspective, protect the workforce?
Mhm. Yeah, and thank you, Carmen Rosa. And I would add how important it is also for leaders of organizations and supervisors to take part in the trainings that are being offered as well, so that everyone's hearing the information, and that then it's not the providers who are then have to inform or try to get buy-in from the organization. It's great to offer these types of trainings to whole organizations so that there can be buy-in from the top, and it can really be shown in how things are facilitated and the culture set in an agency. So that's always ideal if possible. If that's not the case where you're at, I think bringing what you're learning to your organizations and finding concrete ways in which what you're learning here today and many other resources that are available can be implemented, so that you're not the only one holding this, because this is really community work, and there needs to be buy-in from the whole organization. Yeah, that's a key to sustainability with this.
Absolutely. And on those lines, we have a number of comments and a couple of questions around the self-care components, and some echoing the feelings of isolation, either as experiencing similar situations to the families that we're speaking about, but also as in their professional path, that one individual says that sometimes they feel as if I'm one person at work and another person at home, and finds it difficult to put some of the self-care into practice. Any other strategies you may not have mentioned, or things that they may want to keep in mind for those self-care pieces?
I think you should know yourself really well and know what works for you, and that might change from one person to the next. I can tell you, for me, breathing is free. It's available everywhere I'm at. It doesn't take that much time. People don't even have to know I'm doing it. So for me, being present with whatever comes up, breathing through it, and then re-engaging with the present moment is what has helped the most. Other things like building things in your calendar that you enjoy and that do promote balance and wellness, and not canceling on yourself. So just like you wouldn't reschedule with a friend, don't reschedule with yourself, because sometimes those are the easiest things that go is, I was supposed to do this, but now I'm busy with something else. So really making a true commitment day to day, and finding a team that can hold you accountable. Maybe let them know how you would know, or how they would know when you're starting to become off balance, and they can maybe remind you, like, did you do whatever, racquetball, or whatever it is that you do every week that helps you stay balanced? Is that still in your schedule? Is that one of the things that went out the window? Those are some concrete suggestions. There's a lot of resources online, and we can add them on to the blog post of such as the Care Wheel or other things. But I guess I'm just sharing what has helped me the most, and I imagine, Carmen Rosa, maybe you have something you want to add to.
Like you are saying, I think it works differently for different people. One thing that I do know too is that sometimes, again, if you are overburdened with things that are happening at home and at work, it's difficult to figure out what even works for you. So having someone who you trust, you might not have a supervisor, but someone in which you can confide, and that can maybe not have so much closeness, like a family member or a husband, but someone who can, like Vilma was saying, could have like that hold that reflective space, so they can help you monitoring how all these stressors are affecting you, and maybe what you need to do next. But I want to again to emphasize and these things about that you were mentioning, Vilma, about sustainability, and again, organizational responsibility, and I think that we even know now that the World Health Organization is recognizing that burnout is affecting many people. So that there is an organizational responsibility to begin to think about the impact of secondary traumatic stress and burned out, and how to make changes, small changes that can benefit the lives of workers and then the lives of families in that way, because we're talking about the parallel process.
Thank you. We have another question to see if there are any other strategies or different strategies or a different approach even helping those on the front line who are actively working with families that are asylum seekers or in the reunification process with those type of programs. Is there anything that hasn't been mentioned that you'd suggest for supporting those workers?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carmen.
No, go ahead, please.
I think what I might add is that rather than having certain things you do every once in a while, like a yoga practice or something that you do once a week, I encourage you to think about what you can do every day in the moment, even if it seems really small, but to do very often. So for frontline providers who are directly hearing so many stories, I would structure your schedule in a way that is aligned with what we shared today. So again, that might need some organizational buy-in, but it might mean not going back to back. It might mean 10 minutes in between sessions, or at least 5 minutes to really stand up, go outside, get some sun, wash your hands, feel the water in your hands, be present with yourself, be present with what came up for you in that session, and really kind of let that go so that it allows you to be present for the next person. Because I know many providers who are like attorneys or case managers, teachers, who are hearing a whole day of many stories in detail, and they need to hear it to be able to help people, and it's hard to remain engaged and present for so much material. So I encourage you to think of small things that you do very often, not rather, maybe in addition to, the bigger things that you do once a week, or a vacation once, every few months. I think what's most impactful is the routines. What's in your routine that helps you feel balanced? What do you do every morning when you get to work? What do you do in between meeting with people that helps you stay present for the next story? What do you do to connect with those that you love once you get home so that these memories don't get in the way? How do you stay present with what keeps you doing well? And I encourage you, I don't know what that is for you or for each person, but maybe make a plan for yourself, make a list. If you don't know, ask people who know you well what they notice in you when you feel balanced or not, and how they can tell when you're a little bit off, or the work is starting to get to you, or and what have they noticed that helps you. But I think most people know what helps them. I think most people get very busy, and it's the first thing that goes. So it really is more of a commitment or a value. I would put like a reminder on your desk or on your bed or your car, wherever you spend the most time, that reminds you, like, commit to yourself. You are your best tool. So keep, just like with any profession, you keep your tool working well. And your heart, keeping yourself balanced is a priority for you to do your job well. And so it's more about the little reminders. If there's a quote that stands out for you, write it, put it somewhere so that you see it. I think it's more the little things that are the big things in my mind.
Thank you for those very specific reminders. I think everyone listening, for whatever their situation is, can take some of those nuggets and implement them. I think we have time for one more question, and it sort of wraps up.
May I add one that I think that is also very powerful, that I have heard many people So some things came today about how isolating it can be to work with immigrant families, and it's true because in part we know, or for many of us, we have known what has been happening for many years, but there are not a lot of strategies per se. We are these are attempts of creating strategies that are going to be different with each family. And then one thing that I have heard in the consultations that I do that has been very powerful to combat this sense of isolation is to sometimes form a coalition of people who are doing the same kind of work that might not be your colleagues, but then someone who works in another early childhood center, and then to get together once a month. It could be to talk about the work or have a meal together or support each other, and so you can normalize some of these experiences, and then you can feel understood, and then sometimes you can get creative, and then also come with strategies to take care of yourself, but then also maybe to advocate for the families with whom you are serving. And I have seen that having very positive effects as well.
Oh, perfect, thank you. I think with that, we will actually, there's a list of resources here, and many of them are listed on the landing pad. The recording of this evening's presentation will be available tomorrow on the BILD's landing pad for this series, as well as a number of resources. If you have any resources as listeners that you would utilize and find helpful, please feel free to send them to us. We'd love to include them on this list. And so then let's see, there's the next resources. And we also want to invite you to the next and final webinar in this series, discussing promising practices and strategies for policy and legislation, when we will be joined by our colleagues at CLASP. And originally this was scheduled for July 18th. We have made the change to the 24th due to the pending immigration raids or threatened immigration raids. We are we're rescheduling so that our partners at CLASP may focus their efforts and attentions on supporting the population being affected. So we want to thank so much our speakers this evening, Carmen Rosa Noroña and Dr. Vilma Reyes. And please visit the landing pad and know that we will send out, we value your feedback, and we will be sending out a questionnaire following the webinar tomorrow, so take a moment to answer that. And please let us know if you have any questions. If your questions were not answered this evening, we are working on a frequently asked questions document that will try to capture and answer as many of the questions that were gathered for this series. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.